Hello, welcome everyone. I can see there's more people coming in at the moment. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Just drop something in the chat if you can't. Fantastic. I can already see some people can hear us, which is great. I imagine we're going to have lots of people drop in over the next kind of few minutes. So I will get started, and we are recording this panel. So please, if you have to drop off at any point, if you feel like you need to pop off and have a cup of tea, you can always watch it back a little bit later. So I can see more people coming in now. So I am going to get started and just say hello and welcome to our first ever live panel at Zing Learning. We are absolutely delighted to have you here. We are so happy that you have joined us for this lunchtime discussion on becoming an active ally to women in the world of work. We hope you're as excited as we are to get stuck in and to listen to this amazing group of women talk about their careers, what we can all do to become better allies to women throughout their careers, but also give us a bit of an opportunity to put any burning questions to our panel of experts in the final part of the panel too. So before we get started, let's actually have a look at who is on this panel and the fantastic women who are going to be sharing their experiences and advice. So can I just check that everybody can see the screen? Everybody can see these wonderful people that are on here. Let's see if we've got that. Lovely. We've got some chats coming through. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you for those of you that are just sharing that with us. We will see people as they come through. So first off, you have me. I am Zoe Holland. I will be your moderator today. A little about me. I am a diversity and inclusion learning expert with over 17 years of organizational learning experience, and that spans lots of different industries as well. I created Zing Learning a few years ago after working full-time in kind of learning leadership roles and managing multiple D&I learning programs. I set the business up because I wanted to be able to make a bigger impact on society, not just within the organization that I was employed with. So today you're going to get lots of energy from me, as this topic is something that's very close to my heart. And as the moderator today, I'll be bringing you my expertise, knowledge, but also curiosity to ask some really insightful questions and spark some really fantastic discussions amongst our panelists. So talking of our panelists, let's get to know them a little better before we get started with our discussions. They are Sara Gomez. So Sara is a role model for women everywhere. Her career as an HR director and chief people officer has led organizations she has worked with to enjoy high growth and transformation. She is an inspiring, empowering, and warm leader and has changed the lives of many people through her coaching and motivating approach to strategic people leadership. She's had a very big influence on my career, and also I don't think I would have even set up Zing Learning if it hadn't been for her. So she's probably blushing behind the scenes right now. We're really proud to be able to bring you her voice, her wealth of knowledge and experience to this panel today. I can't wait for you to hear what she has to share. Next up, we have the fantastic Grace Mazzuros. So Grace is an accomplished and highly driven leader, an expert in organizational development, leadership, and also coaching, and actually an individual that brings bounds of energy and passion into everything that she does. She's a real advocate for women's voices and is always working on something really exciting that inspires other women to follow suit. And we're honored to be able to have her here, and we can't wait for you to hear some of the impressive and thought-provoking insights that she's going to share with us today. Next up, we have Natasha Jules. So Natasha is an award-winning community worker with over 20 years experience working in an educational, parental engagement and community kind of setting in a variety of roles. She's working really hard on lots of different projects to really impact social change and is making waves in her incredible work around kind of bringing Black history to the forefront of mainstream history with lots of really well-known education providers. And we are delighted to get her on this panel and are looking forward to hearing about her experiences throughout. And finally, we have Rachel Longsmith. So Rachel is the creative director and co-founder of Narrate, which is the design studio that drives positive impact on society. She is the host of the podcast Making It in Design, where she looks at how women and non-binary people can get ahead in a male-dominated industry. She's also a mentor at She Says, Who's Your Mama, and truly embodies everything that we can call an ally in the world of women. We can't wait to hear about her experience with being a business owner and, of course, a woman, plus more about her mentoring work as well. And additionally, we have the wonderful Arthur Brito on the call, who is our resident Zing digital expert, who will be taking note of all of your questions as they come through. So don't forget to pop any questions that you have into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll have a look at those at the end of the session and see how many of them we can answer. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our panelists. So welcome, panelists. Hopefully we can get to see you in just a moment with your cameras and your microphones on. Let's have a little bit of a look if we can get those videos started to get you in there. Let's have a little look. I can see some of you coming through now. Fantastic. Hi, Natasha. Nice to see you there. Hello. Hi. Let's see if we can get some more people in here. Fantastic. We've got Sarah here. Wonderful. Hey, nice to see you, Sarah. Excellent. And I think Grace is just coming through now. Lovely. I love it when technology works. That's fantastic. Nice to see you all. I am really excited about this. We had a conversation last week, the five of us, and I think we got quite pumped about the conversations that we're going to have today. So I'm actually just going to kick us straight off and dive straight in, because as we probably all know, this year's theme for International Women's Day was around breaking the bias. So let's just jump straight in and get kicked off with looking a little bit deeper into that and actually allowing everybody that's on this call today just to get to know you and your experience a little bit better. So let's start with you, Rachel, and working in design and owning your own business must kind of come with some gender biases. Have you encountered any of those that you can kind of remember throughout your career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
So hi, everyone. Great to be on this panel. So interestingly, I feel like throughout my whole life, I've kind of wanted to do whatever the boys were doing, mainly because you weren't allowed to do it. For example, play football on the football team, or skateboard or anything like that. And I feel like because of that, I kind of developed a side of my personality, which made me act and be a bit more like one of the boys. So I feel like when I came into the industry, it was a male dominated heavily. I think I've worked in 2 design studios before setting up my own. And I only ever had one person who was working above me in the creative arena, which was a woman, but everyone else was always male. So I was in this kind of like quite masculine world. So that part of my personality helped me push through in these instances. I don't think it's a very good way to be, because I don't feel like you should have to take on traditionally masculine traits in order to be able to get by in your career. But I feel like that's one of the ways that I've got through, push past certain biases. So I can't really say that there's any specific events where I feel like, there's been issues where I've gone like, oh, that was really out of order that they did this and did that. Because once again, when I was in industry, before I started my studio, which I've been running for 8 years now, it wasn't something that people spoke about. So it was more like, I just felt like if I didn't get that opportunity and I didn't do well there, it was because I wasn't a very good designer. But looking back now, I see like, well, actually, there probably were times where I was overlooked for things or where I wasn't taken seriously because of being a woman and a young woman, but it's kind of difficult for me to pinpoint those things. I also feel like because of the way that I am, and because, as I said, like I have some of these traits which are quite, push myself forward for things. And there's almost been a level of like people haven't dared to do that sort of stuff to me because they know that potentially I would call them out on it or I would push back on it. But I have been in situations where I've seen, especially in one of my past design studios, where we had women who would come in as interns, and they would be asked to do things like walk the dog, do the washing up, make tea. And I was always like, it is not an intern's job to do that. They're here to learn to be creative, to learn from us. But all of these little asks were always done sort of through Skype, behind the scenes. And I saw like things like, I remember one time, one of who's a good friend now, who came to work as an intern, was asked to create some typography out of one of the lead creatives' chest hair. And at the time, it was one of those things that, you did it because you couldn't turn around and say, I'm not doing this. We were scared to do that. But we talk about it now. We're like, we literally can't believe that happened, that she had to make type out of his chest hair. Wow. So it's kind of like, there's been plenty of times when the bias has affected me, and running my own business as well. I feel like, again, I'll always feel like it's because I wasn't good enough for the job. But ultimately, I've also gone into pitches where I've been pitching to men, and I've seen that I've been pitching against a group, like another team of men, and they've got it over me. And I've always thought it's because I'm not good enough. But I think there's definitely a bias of like, she's a young woman, she's quite petite, like she can't do this. Whether that's conscious or unconscious, I feel like there are lots of levels of that. So that's my answer in the first place. But with how I sort of overcome this sort of bias is I try to surround myself with women who really have my back and really support me. And therefore, if I ever feel anything like this now, I'll speak to them, and then they'll encourage me to maybe call it out, or to say something, or how to deal with the situation. I really feel like building a network of like-minded women and allies around you is a great thing to do. You're going to just feel so much more supported doing that. So that's my first answer to the question.
Yeah, wow. Okay, thank you so much for that. I think I definitely saw some other nods with the panelists there. I imagine we've had similar experiences. And I think it'd be quite interesting, actually, Grace, I'd love to know, because I know that you've had to deal with gender stereotypes too in the world of work. I guess I want to look at it from the really far end of the scale now and think about what is the most ridiculous kind of gender stereotype that you have encountered in your career?
This is a really interesting one, because I was a woman before I was a mum, and my daughter's 10 years old, so I should kind of definitely feel like a mum by now. But I think it still blows my mind when people have this view that because I'm a mother, I can't be flexible and I can't do certain jobs that require traveling or require, afternoon meetings around school hours. It blows my mind, especially because my daughter's got a dad, and I'm fairly confident he doesn't get asked those questions. And I still get asked that. And I know, my daughter's 10, she's unfortunately nearly going to be a teenager, which is something I'm still struggling with. But it just continues to blow my mind that is a question. And there have been instances where I've directly been asked that question in an interview, or prior to being, to a decision being made as to who the job's going to be offered to. It's never the employer, it's usually a recruiter. But then when an offer isn't made, my thought is, who was the offer made to? And I do traditionally see that actually the offer's gone to a man who they've assumed won't have those issues. And it just completely blows my mind, because as women and as mothers in business, we have access to exactly the same support network as men who are fathers in the business do. And I think that stereotype is one that we really just need to get rid of. And one of the things that I'd really kind of shout out to the world is that, firstly, a woman has access to the same support, probably more, because she's more willing to ask for help because she's used to having to do that. And secondly, being a mother in the working world is actually, you're getting someone that's already got a full-time job. She's amazing. She's going to be brilliant. Stop asking the question. It's not necessary. And women are the first to hold their hands up to say when they can't do something. So if a woman is applying for a role that requires travel, that requires flexibility, assume that she can do it, because she wouldn't apply for it if she couldn't. And and she will be the first one to actually let you know if there are any issues around flexibility.
Love that. I think there's something in that she wouldn't have applied for it if she couldn't have done it, because we know there's statistics out there to say that men are more likely to apply for roles, even if they can only do a small percentage of the job description, whereas women feel like they need to be much, much more kind of experienced in each of the different kind of aspects of the role description. So yeah, if I've applied for it, that means I've got some sort of kind of things I can do to work around that. But yeah, I know we've got some other mothers on the call as well, so this is going to be really interesting as we kind of go through that. But thanks for that, Grace. Definitely something very interesting there around that kind of mother-father aspect in the, or at least that dynamic in those kind of aspects. But yeah, thank you. Natasha, hello, welcome.
Hi.
Hello. You have worked across a variety of educational organizations, but also supported the empowerment of women and girls in general. What's been your biggest takeaway with regards to the way that girls and women have experienced gender bias?
I think moving on from what Grace has said, that particularly working in primary education and in the community, what I take away from that is that actually a lot of it starts quite young. And what happens is that it's very different. No two experiences are the same, but how you view that bias and how that bias impacts you is often shaped by your culture, your living situation, your socialization, and so on. And so going back, thinking about when I first started working in schools and starting from the very bottom, which is the nursery, and seeing that actually girls are often encouraged not to go on the climbing frame, or not to play football in the outdoor area, and so on, and challenging that. So for me, my biggest takeaway is that it needs to be challenged, and there needs to be some modeling of that. So actually picking up on the fact that your mum's doing possibly 3 different things as well as a job. So if she can do that, why can't you go in the outdoor area and play with a spade? You know, so actually it's about that, and making sure that those choices and the opportunities are available to all. So I remember covering the nursery, for instance, and taking out the tea sets and saying, no, today we are going to be using the Meccano, and everybody's using the Meccano. So you give that opportunity, because otherwise you never get an opportunity to know that you would quite like that, because it's been decided for you. And I also remember, and one of the biggest takeaways for me was I taught a year 3 class, and I had one young lady, she was a twin, boy and girl. And every single time we did messy play, there she would be, with her apron, I'll clean. No, you won't. No, you won't. So actually what I did is I ensured everybody took responsibility for cleaning, and it wasn't deemed as that's the thing to do, because those biases start so young. So that's my biggest takeaway. And without challenging, and without seeing models, and without seeing alternatives, they continue throughout life. And I saw that then again when I worked in the Women's Centre and so on. So yeah, that would be my biggest takeaway.
Wow, yeah. And actually that directly links back to what Rachel said, which is that, you know, and we've probably all experienced this. I know I certainly have, especially being younger in kind of various different roles, where you go to a meeting and somebody's like, right, who's going to take notes? And they kind of all look around at you kind of thing, because you're the only woman in the room. Or even worse, we'll go, yeah, we'll do it, because we've been conditioned to kind of be like, oh yeah, no, that's our role kind of thing. So yeah, challenging it really early is a really great piece of advice there. And I think there's probably parents listening or watching this later that probably will feel like actually they have a little bit of a role within that as well, not just at the school and educational kind of aspect. But yeah, amazing. Thank you. Sarah, I want to come to you next, and I want to talk about your experience in general, because actually it's been really impressive. And actually, I think even though you've had really great experience and great success throughout your career so far, I think I want to just find out from you, what's been the biggest challenge for you with gender stereotypes, and kind of where have you seen that in the different industries that you've worked in most?
Very kind with your words, Zoe. I was blushing. So I think I'm at the tail end of my career. So I go back to the 80s when I started work. There was plenty of it around then. So if I think about working in the travel industry in the 80s, we had air hostesses. You know, if you were a male air hostess, you had to be gay, of course. You know, that's the assumption in travel around that. And most definitely my sales director, when I was a regional sales manager, when I went for the interview, there were 3 men on the panel who were sitting on sort of desk chairs, and I was sitting on a sofa much lower down on the other side of them. They could get a good old look at me. So for sure it was rife in the 80s. But more recently, I would say, and I've been in both insurance and banking within financial services. I've done retail, I've done insurance, I've done travel, and I've done banking, although it was commercial banking rather than investment. But that's where I've seen it more recently. And as recently as in the last sort of 3 years. And I think that the most obvious and most frequent observation I have of seeing it is men talking over women in meetings, or men kind of taking the ideas for their own. So, you know, a more junior female says something, and 5 minutes later, a man says the same thing, and everyone goes, "Oh, great idea. Yeah, fantastic." And I think that's the main thing. It is just this assumption that the woman in the room hasn't necessarily got a point of view that should change things. Yeah. And I guess the best I saw of that was there was one female that I worked with in the business where I saw this happening most, who would call it out in a way that landed well, just by saying, "Oh, that's a great idea. That's exactly what so and so just said a moment ago." So, you know, nice for you to have mirrored her input into this conversation. So it's that calling it out. So I think banking is by far the current environment where I see it still coming through. You know, it's not. I think the sad thing is it's not overt, but it's there, and I think it's that's the problem. Is that it just pervades, you know? So yeah, that's where I would describe it best.
Yeah. I think the overt is way more dangerous a lot of the time, isn't it? There's definitely some covert kind of gender bias and stereotyping going on. And actually sometimes people don't call it out, which can be part of the problem anyway. But I love that example that you just gave of somebody that called it out in a way that was like still giving credit to the person to remind everyone, "Oh, by the way, that idea actually came from this person over here. Thank you so much for mirroring that." I love that. What a great kind of way to do that. Yeah, I'm definitely going to take that on myself now. I'm sure we've got other people on here that would do the same. Brilliant. Lovely. Thank you for that. So Grace and Natasha, I want to come back to you now, because we can't possibly talk about supporting kind of women and non-binary people in their careers without discussing the challenges that are faced when you add intersectionality into it. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges that you have had as Black women throughout your careers. What's the biggest misconception about you? And let's go to you, Grace, first.
So this is a huge question for me, obviously, as a Black woman. Now, there are a few different things that I want to cover off with this one. So firstly, I think the biggest challenge for me as a Black woman, Natasha, you talked about modelling earlier on. Throughout my career, there have not been enough Black senior leaders in any organisation that I've worked in. So I'm usually the only one, and I'm traditionally the only one aspiring to progress because there aren't many of us. And that has always been a huge challenge. But I'd say more recently in my career, one of the things that I've found to be a big misconception amongst Black women that are in senior roles is that the idea or the potential for me as another Black woman to join your business as a senior leader puts you at risk. And I think that's a huge misconception. And it's something that starts when we're very little. And it's the view that you have to work twice as hard to get half as much, but also now that you've worked that hard to get as much as you have, you've got to hold on to it. And what that has sometimes led us to do is hold on to it and not share, and not to make space, and not to open doors for others that have been open for us in the past. And I think for me, that's something that's really, really significant and is something that I'm really passionate about moving forward, is actually how do we as Black women, particularly Black women in senior leadership roles, how do we not block other women from getting to the levels that we've gotten to? And it is traditionally subconscious. There will be other reasons that are given or kind of other comments that are made. But I think my biggest kind of cry is for us to internally challenge ourselves as to genuinely what could we do and how could we do more and how could we do better. But a traditional misconception, this is just an easy one for me, and this happens all the time, is that I'm intimidating and trouble. So I am 5'9". I keep trying to claim I'm 5'8". I'm 5'9". I'm 5'9", and traditionally I wear 3-inch heels, so I'm easily 6 foot. And I walk into a room with confidence and a lot of energy, and people find that intimidating, and they therefore label me as intimidating. So what that then leads to me doing is questioning and doubting myself and being extremely nervous whenever I enter a room, because I'm worried that if I shine too brightly, I will be held back. And that's based on experience, unfortunately. And then the trouble misconception, that's often said with love. So here comes trouble. And growing up, I thought that was really cute, and I laughed about it, and I was like, oh, not trouble, I'm a sweetheart. And I am, but I literally always say that. I'm not trouble, I'm a sweetheart. And I shouldn't have to say that, but I definitely feel like I need to, because whilst it's traditionally said innocently, the connotation behind it is really troubling, because I don't see that being said to my white friends or my white colleagues when they enter a room. And my experiences sometimes in my career have had people kind of inadvertently, you know, if I speak up on something, or if I have a confident opinion about something, or if I challenge a view, to inadvertently call me angry. And that in itself, the word angry is not a bad word, but when it's said to a Black woman, you even if the person said it innocently, you don't know who's hearing it and how they've received that. And I think, you know, those are things that have and continue to be a challenge for me throughout my career. And I think what that does is it then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy to a certain extent. So when people see you as intimidating, you then start to question yourself and think, am I intimidating? And you then start to hold yourself back, and you start to mute yourself in spaces, and you lose the reason why people are attracted to you in the first place. And I think my biggest message to women in a similar kind of space, or having had similar experiences, is you know who you are. And there is always going to be a certain element of playing the game, but don't let playing the game take away from who you are at your core. The reasons you love yourself, and the reasons that the people that love you, but also see yourself as just a beautiful creature that is going to be an asset to any organization that you work in, and allow people the opportunity to get to know you, because I'm traditionally labeled as intimidating or trouble before anyone's actually spoken to me or spent time getting to know me. And I've had a number of occasions throughout my life, whether that be at university, whether that be at secondary school, whether that be in organizations that I've worked in, where people that have become my friends have openly said to me, again with love, that when I first met you, I didn't like you. And I didn't like you because I thought, who is this beautiful, confident woman? Who does she think she is? And then I got to know you and I loved you. And whilst I appreciate they say it with love and they kind of see it being a compliment, it breaks my heart every time, because that's exactly how I feel walking into a room. I immediately feel like I'm going to be disliked. People are going to make assumptions. I therefore go into myself. It's something I'm working on. But I just think it's really important for people to know that actually what you see may not actually be the person. And you know, rather than making those initial judgments, have a conversation, get to know the person, get to know their story, and then make your decision if necessary. So that's,
yeah, wow. Do you know, it's so funny that you say this, and Sarah will probably back me up with this, because when we met years and years ago, you were working on with an apprenticeship provider, and we were having apprenticeships. And I remember the first time I met you, I remember being like, wow, she's amazing. Intimidating never like came into my mind at all, thank goodness, because otherwise we wouldn't have the kind of work and friendship that we have now. But it's so true. And I think so many confident women, but of course so many Black confident women, and even actually maybe just Black women that aren't that confident, but just the stature and perhaps the presence of something that maybe is a little bit different in the room to what they're kind of used to seeing, that can intimidate people, which is just ridiculous. And that is definitely a gender and an intersectionality kind of bias that just needs to disappear. That is ridiculous. But thank you. That's so insightful. I know we had a little comment there from somebody that had to run, but they said it was very insightful. So thank you for that, Grace. Just incredible. But yeah, so different to my experience with you. Thank goodness. Otherwise we wouldn't be here today. Exactly. Natasha, the same question to you. Is there anything that you would add to that? Would you kind of confirm that you've had a similar experience to Grace, or is it something a little bit different?
I would just say that, Grace, you articulated that beautifully, because actually that is what we suffer, and it feels like suffering, because for me, what I feel like is that often you enter the space as this confident Black woman, and you come out of the space with that confidence chipped away at, because the way you are treated, you've got the double whammy of the fact that you are a Black woman,
yeah,
particularly in spaces like education. Because if you look at education leadership, the hierarchy of education is predominantly male, and the models of Black females in that space is few and far between. Even on a middle management and teaching level, if you like, what you find is that a lot of those spaces are occupied by other by Black women in other sort of fields, the cleaners, the kitchen staff, and the teaching assistant. So often what's happened to me is that I am the teacher, the class teacher, and I have been totally overlooked and walked straight past because I couldn't possibly be a teacher, you know. And what I would also add to that is that you are constantly on your P's and Q's then, because how you then challenge that. I have been told I'm challenging. I have been told as the term of endearment, you're challenging. And actually, as you've said, Grace, I'm not challenging, I'm lovely, but why should I have to do that? And when you look around and you see that nobody else has to go through that, that is a hard reality of life. Added to the fact that, yes, we are always taught almost, it's almost imparted on us, you have to do twice as hard, you have to work twice as hard. So you're thinking about that, and you're also thinking about, how can I stay on my P's and Q's? So you've got all of these conversations going on in your head as well as everything else. So what I would also say is that on top of that, you then have to think, right, that woman who has made it and has got further, and I find this with Black women as well as white women, if I'm honest, but they've made it up the ladder, and almost, as my nan used to say, throw stones behind you. No, it's not helpful. We need to be able to climb up that ladder and get through that window without realizing that actually you've screwed down the window and bits and pieces. It's particularly for Black women, because it's almost like you feel, will I ever get this opportunity? If I don't do this, I'm at risk, you know. And you're also thinking that somebody's going to point out, have you really got that qualification? Should you be doing that job? So I definitely feel like that. And Grace, thank you, because that is it in a nutshell, you know. And in education, and if you think it's education that forms the basis of wherever we go, it's there. It's just really rife.
Yeah. And I think, thank you so much, Natasha. I think there's something really powerful about asking these questions face to face. I mean, not literally, but I think that there is something about just talking about it and being really transparent about these things. And you're talking about education there. And I think we'll probably get some nods from Grace, Sarah, and Rachel as well about their industries and actually how that's exactly mirrored in the same way. And also that idea that women also need to be great allies to women. This, you know, it's not just on men and non-binary people. Of course, we need men and non-binary people to be great allies. And there's a lot of work that could be done that isn't being done. And even small things that we've been talking about today that could make a big difference. But of course, we also need to be allies to each other and we need to kind of lift each other up. But yeah, really, really great examples there of kind of how gender bias is still very much alive and kicking in the working world, even with some previous experiences. It's still very much there. So I think there's some real food for thought there, not just for men and non-binary people, but as I said, also for women as well. I think now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a little bit more about some of the kind of positives and some of the great things that you've seen come through. So Natasha and Rachel, you've both done amazing things in the mentoring space for girls and young women. You've supported and you continue to support social mobility, empowerment, and really helping to smash the gender biases that lots of girls and women face, and of course non-binary people as well. But from your mentoring experience, what has been the biggest challenge that you've seen? And I think I'm going to start with you, Rachel, if that's okay.
Yeah. I think one of the main things is confidence. So I think, especially in the design industry, as I said before, it's predominantly male world. So when you're going into interviews, you're often interviewed by a lot of other men, and just being in a space where you don't see as many people like yourself, that having the confidence to really be yourself, as Grace and Natasha were saying as well, it's kind of like, it's difficult, and confidence is a massive thing. And especially the design industry as well, is like there's so many people trying to get jobs in the industry, and there aren't that many jobs, that you often have to go through a lot of no's, like sometimes hundreds of no's, and sometimes hundreds of interviews as well. It's just, so that if you don't have great confidence and then it gets knocked and knocked and knocked, that is one of the biggest things. And I think we were touching on this a little bit earlier before the panel started, this idea of imposter syndrome as well. So it's like, even when you do get into the industry and you're at a certain level, you're suddenly like, I shouldn't, should I even be here? Am I qualified to be here? So I think confidence is one of the things I've found. All the women who I work with are all saying like, I need help with this, and this is such a big thing. So as I said, like getting in, I often help people to get jobs in the industry. I work with juniors a lot, and just then trying to just help them and encourage them to work on practicing things so that they really feel like they know what they're talking about and they have the confidence and things like that. But yeah, confidence is a massive thing. Definitely.
Yeah, that seems to be the theme of the day, doesn't it? Actually, that's definitely come through in everything that everyone's talked about here. And as you said, we were talking about this before we started the panel. Maybe we should have started the panel early and talked about that as well. But yeah, okay, great. And then Sarah and Grace, I want to talk about, Natasha, I've just realized I didn't ask you. I'm so sorry. We've done lots of mentoring work together. Please tell me a little bit about your kind of experience there.
I would echo what Rachel said. I would add to that and I would possibly, that there is a real lack of modeling behaviors, and modeling what your expectations, modeling aspirations as well. Do you know what I mean? But because it's almost like you have to see it to believe that you can be it. So that, but I'd also say with the confidence, it's supporting the building of that confidence and acknowledging that in order for your confidence to be built up, you have to be resilient. So you've got to get it wrong to get it right. It's okay to make mistakes, but I feel like oftentimes, particularly women, we struggle to make those mistakes because we are scared that if we make those mistakes, we won't get those opportunities again. So it's about being confident, but also being confident to know that actually mistakes are learning situations, as opposed to that's it, it's the end. So that would be what I would add to that.
Yeah, I think as a business owner myself, that's probably the big lesson I've taken away from everything that I do, is that, you know what, just learn from it, and don't let it knock your confidence. And if it does, surround yourself with amazing women who will help build you back up again, so that you can go again and try it in a slightly different way the next time. Amazing. Okay. I think actually then what would be really good is just to get some kind of examples of where your own allyship skills are. I think we've given some really good tips already as we've kind of gone through. I'm hoping people have been picking up on those. But I think I want to explore that idea of allyship a little bit further before we kind of come to the questions that have been coming through from people. Let's kind of have a look at some of the practical ways. And I think, Grace, if I come to you first, do you have any examples of where other women or non-binary people have been your ally in your career?
Yeah, do you know what? I did have to take a long think about this, because as we've all kind of mentioned or alluded to, there aren't that, well, you know, I'm 37 now. So throughout my career, I've traditionally been managed by men. So I had to really kind of rack my brain to think. And I went back to my first ever manager. So I did a work placement when I was 14 years old at a care home, and I was managed by the most amazing, vivacious, full of life Black woman who ran the care home, and her name was Cheryl Levy, and I'm shouting her out because she's actually like a big sister to me now. She gave me an opportunity, and I still remember her getting out of her red Volkswagen Golf, which at the time to me was like my dream car. Yeah. Get out of that car, swinging her keys in her hand with a smile on her face and just ready to take on the world. And the reason I mention her as being kind of one of my biggest allies is because she gave me my first ever professional reference, and it was amazing. And she helped me with applications. She sat me down and was really honest with me in terms of this is what will work and this is what won't work. And she's just been a constant guide. I've had another amazing mentor who actually, she became more of an ally as I was exiting the organization that I was leaving. And it was an amazing lady called Abby, who essentially sat me down. I actually left an organization because my line manager, who was a woman, unfortunately was not the best line manager that any of the team would have wished for, unfortunately. And she was doing the wildest things and essentially stopping the team from progressing as individuals because she was so desperate to hold on to what she'd gotten. And when I resigned, I spoke to her line manager, who is Abby, who asked me why I was leaving. And I told her really honestly, because by then I had nothing to lose. I'd already resigned. And she sat me down and she said, I wish you discussed that with me before you resigned, because no one has spoken up about it, but I have heard about it, but no one has actually said anything to me. And one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you for your career going forward is that you need to speak up, because good leadership comes from learning. And if people do not speak up, leaders do not learn how to do better. And she, you know, that piece of feedback I've actually taken throughout my career, and maybe might be why some people might see me as trouble, because I do speak up when I see things that are wrong, or when I see teams suffering as a result of poor leadership. I think it's really important to speak up. And then two others that I'm going to shout out is a lady called Kim, who was actually a career mentor of mine, and she was previously a client at an organization that I worked with, and she was just an amazing leader for her business. She was caring, she was driven, she was competent, and she was passionate about what she did. And she just, every time I saw her, I was amazed. So I just begged. Well, I didn't need to beg, thankfully, but I was prepared to. And she just agreed to be a mentor, and she gave me monthly coaching sessions free of charge. I don't encourage people to do that because I know we all need to make money. But Kim, I love you for doing that, because without a doubt, she is the reason why I've been brave enough to do some of the things that I've done. And then the final ally that I mentioned, last but not least, is Zoe Holland. Big up. Like without a doubt, Zoe has become a sister and a cheerleader. So I have had a chaotic 20 21. I was diagnosed with breast cancer last year. It completely turned my world upside down for a couple of days. But having, Zoe there to kind of just check in, to continue to cheer me on as well, because despite the fact I was going through that, I still wanted to be a director. I still wanted to progress. I still wanted to do all these things, and I was determined to do it. And I think it's really important having allies like Zoe and like Kim and like Abby in your lives, just to build you up and to help you to keep going and to tell you why it's worth it and why you shouldn't give up. So those are my examples.
Wow. I don't know how good my camera is. I don't know if you can see that I'm the same color as my dress now. That was not prepared. Thank you so much, Grace. That's so sweet. I run workshops on allyship, and I say you can't call yourself an ally. Somebody else has to call your actions ally kind of actions. So thank you so much for that. We won't get into the kind of shmush of it. We'll see each other later. We'll do that later. But thank you very much. That's very kind. Rachel, in your opinion, then, how do you think, and still kind of sticking on that kind of allyship mindset, how do you think that women and non-binary people can support other women in business more?
So I think you need to start by being the role model that you wanted. So that's kind of what I've tried to do. So we've spoken a lot about models, haven't we? And I feel like, when I was working in an environment and there wasn't someone there who I felt like I could look up to, who understood me, I feel like I want to be that person now. And I feel like it's so important to make yourself available to, to helping other women and non-binary folks coming up under you as well. So that's why I try to do as much mentoring as I can. I try and say, if you ever need any help with anything to anyone, anywhere, my inbox is always open, and I'll always try and get back to everyone in whatever way I can. Obviously, there's a limit to exactly what I can do, but yeah. I think being available to help and letting people know that is just really important. Because a lot of the time, which I've noticed as well from my mentoring, is, once again, the confidence thing. Like women will often say, I don't feel like it's okay to DM that person. And it's like, when you DM that person because you love them, they're going to be like, this is awesome that you love me. This is great. And if I can help, I will help. So it's kind of like, letting people know that you're there and available is like really important.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And then Sarah, we've talked about women and non-binary people, but actually, what about men? What can men in the workplace do? And kind of, have you seen any examples of allyship from men before in your career?
I don't know if this is a good example or not, but I want to use it because it was someone who did that for me. So and whether this was an actual disadvantage or a perceived disadvantage that I thought I had, no surprise there that I thought it probably was, but I had, and probably still have a little bit of, I'm in awe of what I see as clever people. So I came up through business. I left school, went to a management training program, didn't go to uni. And so I've always had this cleverness bit that sits here, like, you're not clever enough to do this. You're not clever. And it used to hold me back. And I was talking to a male boss of mine, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and he was just super helpful with me on it. But the way he played it out, what I didn't know I was doing was, he said to me, Sarah, get your elbows in. If I can give you one piece of advice, is get your elbows in. He said, people respect you. They know what you can do. You don't need to be doing this in meetings and around the place because you're already there. But behaviorally, because I saw myself as not clever enough, I was kind of acting in a way that was fronting that confidence piece. And he just said, just be yourself. So I'm like Grace, I'm full of confidence. And sometimes I have difficulty explaining the whole women in leadership piece because I'm just kind of like, I am who I am. And actually that's part of it. I think we have to look at our own internal playbook, and we need to examine what's going on in our minds so that if you are naturally confident, then that's fine. Okay, we take it forward. We've all got our little chimps on our shoulders, and he helped me definitely with that. But I think there's just something around show up as yourself, but understand your internal playbook, understand and go find someone to help you with that. And the talk about mentoring, I've got oodles of mentors that I've had over my career, and nobody's ever said no to me. And I've said, do you mind if I come and chat to you about something? Men or women, hasn't made any difference. I've had both, and they've all been crucial. to just helping me through solve problems more of the time. And the other thing I've struggled with is just around the whole, should we act like men or not? And I was speaking to our head of culture actually here at Lloyd's, who is an amazing guy who joined us about 6 months ago. And the way he described it to me was this kind of, this show up as yourself, but take account of what you see around you.
Mm.
And there's nothing wrong with looking at things around you and taking some of those, and stop making it about men and women.
Yeah.
And there are some things where you watch how a man sits in a meeting and how a woman, I'm doing it now. I sit forward most of the time, never sits forward. A man sits like this. So kind of, but when I'm in an executive meeting and I'm amongst, mainly men, as I've always been, I am conscious now. I don't sit quite like that, but I don't sit like this. So there are things, but the way I've squared it away is that it's not about me acting like a man. It's me starting to see what works in business. That's helped. But yeah, definitely had a male ally, had a brilliant female ally who, in my moment of need, when I was trying to juggle a failing marriage and childcare, and I resigned from the business because I thought I can't do both. And she said to me, take a career break, have a year's career break. Do not resign. Just go take a year, but the job will be here when you come back. And that sprungboarded me into all sorts of things after that. So yeah, both, I think.
Lovely. And I actually do want to give a bit of a shout out to your husband, Kiko, because he is also an ally to you. So the reason you've also been able to build your career even further after having another child in a later relationship is because he has been a partner in your relationship. It hasn't been that you are the person juggling all the childcare, all of the kind of home stuff. He's really supported your career like that. So I do want to give a little bit of shout out to him as well.
I mean, so I think it's so important. I once had somebody reach out to me. She said, oh, you're Superwoman. I just need to talk to you about this. And I quickly took myself off that pedestal because what she saw was me in a senior position and I had relatively young children. I said, I'm not Superwoman, right? I'm not. There is somebody behind the scenes. And biologically, we are built to have babies. That's one fact we cannot get away from. And somebody has to look after those babies and those children, whether it is you stopping work or you have a husband or you have grandparents or you have a nursery, but someone has to look after the child. And so I try and give people practical advice around, well, who's going to do that for you? Be you. And if it's going to be you, don't be afraid to come back to your career later. I mean, I was 60 last month and I'm kind of at the peak of my career right now, but I'm older to do that. And it's because I took 10 years out and then I got back on it and came back. And that's a confidence thing. But so I think it's just around, you have to have a support network around you. The world is ever going to, continue to produce the next generation, which please goodness we do. So you've got to have it. And yeah, I was very fortunate actually that I had somebody that enabled me to do what I've done.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you. I only bring that up because that was one of the things we talked about when we first kind of talked about doing this panel in the first place. But yeah, we are running out of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to one or two of the questions just to make sure that we don't miss those. But I could talk to you for hours about this. I think it's so fascinating. I'm hoping the people on the call are also enjoying it as much as we are, but also the people that are going to watch this afterwards. We've got a question here about what can men do to be better allies to women. So I'll put that out to anyone that wants to kind of answer that. Is there anyone that's kind of got any thoughts on that at all?
I would say that what men could do is to think equity. So actually think about the fact that nobody's asking for a handout. We're just asking for you to consider and to think about, right, what would that mean for me? If I had to, because everybody's situation is different. And as Sarah's just said, it's about your support network. And as Grace said earlier, you could have a fantastic support network. So actually the opportunities, the inroads that you get should be looked at accordingly. So it should be equity. And what they could do is just, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Just listen to what the needs are. Do you know what I mean? Listen twice as hard as you speak in some respects.
Love
So that would be one of the things I'd say.
amazing.
I can add to that
Rachel,
quickly. So one thing I think that men can do to understand as well is put yourself in someone else's in the shoes, you know. So for example, think, well, you know, if I was that person, how would I feel about that situation? You know, because you'll never fully be able to understand, but at least trying will make such a difference. And then I think you can kind of work out from there, okay, if that's going to make me feel like that, I can understand how it made them feel like that. So what can I do now? So understanding is a big part of allyship, I think. And once you can get that understanding, then you can actively do things to help.
Amazing. And I guess finally, just because we've got a couple of minutes left, so I just want to see if we can get just a top tip just from each of you, just a nice quick top tip to give men, non-binary people, and of course other women to understand how to be an active ally throughout their careers. So let's just go to Grace first. What's your top tip?
And this is speaking from personal experience. Don't let the need to fight for what you deserve. And I feel like as women, you know, we kind of go into our careers feeling like we're going to need to fight for every opportunity because we're usually working in a male-dominated space. Don't let the need to fight for that lead you down, or rather up, a career path that doesn't actually make your soul sing.
Wow.
We sometimes get so caught up with progressing and joining the table that's only male that we actually forget about what we really want and need. And I think that would be my biggest piece of advice. And also, if you're starting your career, now is the best time to identify what genuinely makes your soul sing.
Oh, love that. Absolutely love that. Rachel, what about you?
I would say become a mentor, like do anything you can. Like there's so many mentorship programs out there, and becoming a mentor is a direct way that you can become an ally to someone or some people, you know, somewhere. So, and also it's really rewarding and really good fun and great for people. So I
think we probably all agree with that one here. Thank you so much. Sarah?
Make time for people and actively step in when you see something that shouldn't be happening.
Lovely. And finally, Natasha, just to finish us off there.
I would say a cacophony of all of those, and add to that understanding, and listen and understand. Try to understand, because even if you can't do anything, often just to have somebody that you can speak to and to be there for you helps to build your confidence.
Incredible.
Even if they just nod and smile in the right places, you feel like you have somebody listening.
Yeah, you got that support. Amazing. And I actually would just really quickly add to that, you know, if you are a man in a boardroom or a woman in a boardroom in a very senior position, have a look around. You know, have a think, is this representative of our community that we serve? Is this representative of the rest of the employees in our environments? If not, there's probably something not quite right there. So that's the first kind of place to start. And then you've got all these other fantastic tips there. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for on this panel today. I want to thank all of our panelists. We could have spoken probably for another hour, no doubt, but it's been fantastic. I've definitely taken some things away from this, and I'm hoping you each have as well. And obviously people on listening now or watching a little bit later. Some other questions have come through. We haven't been able to answer them just because we haven't got enough time. We'll come back to you and make sure that they get answered separately. But yeah, we look forward to welcoming you to our next one. Please take something away from this and see if you can become an even better ally to women in the workplace. But thank you, panelists. Thank you from everybody that was here. We will see you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.